All right, welcome to The Ride. I'm Coach Q, and I'm happy to have you back for another episode. Just a quick note, you can see the studio behind me is a little bit messy. I've been getting it together for College Lacrosse Live, which is our live show we're running over on YouTube every Saturday and Monday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. So please come over there and join us. And then second of all, we had a little bit of lag issue here on Austin's episode. Nothing too bad. I was able to edit most of it out, but while you're listening, if there's some quirkiness with response times or anything like that, just keep that in mind. Now, today's conversation is with Carolina Chaos goalkeeper Austin Kaut, who has had a tremendous stint in both the PLL and the MLL. He's all-time 8 in total saves in professional lacrosse history, as well as holding the number 2 spot all-time saves at Penn State University. So in today's conversation, we touched on mental preparation and maintenance at the goalie position, zone and man strategies from a keeper's perspective, his upcoming start in the PLL Championship Series, and more. As always, hopefully you find some value in it. Enjoy the ride. All right, Austin, welcome to The Ride, sir. I'm really excited to have this conversation, man. The Springfield connection is strong here, so I'm really excited to get this one going. How you doing today, man?
Doing good. Appreciate you having me on. It's an honor to be on here. I've seen some of the content you guys have and the guests that you have, and it's an honor to be invited out here.
I think you're the second Chaos player now, because I had Jack Posey on earlier, so I mean this was like almost a year ago at this point, but yeah, I love the Chaos. They're closest to me in Virginia, so you guys are my hometown team, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's a little bit of a the home team being a little farther away than the Virginia, but it's the closest team that you can get to that hopefully we might be able to see out at the Champ Series too. It's coming down there, so we'll be down there in about a month or so that you'll see me out there a little bit more, because I think Blaze is going to be playing indoor, so we'll get to see Kaut between the pipes a little bit there.
Oh, let's go. Tell me a little bit about the Champ Series, man. I know it's like a thing that the PLL has been pushing. It reminds me a little bit, I think Paul's like trying to attack it from that soccer-ish like Champions League format or what have you, like kind of mid-season tournament stuff. Tell me a little bit about it though, because not a lot of people know about the Champ Series.
Yeah, I mean, it's the format basically of what the Olympics are going to have, sixes in a couple years. So smaller field, tighter windows. There's a 2-point arc. It's way closer than it is in outdoor in normal PLL. So it's basically just a shootout for all the lacrosse people that know. It's basically West Jenny drill, up and back and forth. Pick up the ball if you get scored on, you pass it up and go. So it's high-paced, high-volume shooting, so it's exactly what fans want to see. Lots of scoring, and hopefully us goalies can steal a few to keep us in the game.
Yeah, man, I know a lot of fans like to see that, but from a goalie perspective, you're probably taking, 80 shots a game or something like that? Like, that's a tough one.
I'm going to be padded up. I mean, I'm towards the upper end of my career, and I don't recover like I used to, so I'll definitely be, have a little bit of extra padding under there. Just with winter weight that I put on as well, that'll be a little bit of the extra padding, and then obviously
the old winter weight.
Extra padding in general that I'll have on.
Gotcha. Yeah, we all put on a little winter weight, man. So take me a little bit through the breaking news last week, man. I know you're kind of just digesting it yourself, but Colsey has left the program. And we have Stephen Brooks, I believe, is hopping in as the coach into that role. Take me through your thoughts on kind of this going into the championship series and then into the 26th season, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of a shock for us. I mean, we had some conversations with Coach Colsey after the season about how he wanted to come back and was working towards a deal to come back and be our head coach, and wanted to build on what we built last year and started. I guess it just, don't know too much of the details behind that, but I guess it just didn't work out. And then I know that, in past, Stephen Brooks has been working really hard to try to be a head coach, and it kind of seemed like it was probably the perfect fit that he was going to be the head coach. I mean, he just coming off a championship with the Atlas, and he's an unbelievable player, legend of the game. He was a teammate of mine when I was on the Florida launch. So I got to play with him, and then I'm going to get to coach by him, and it's an exciting time for Chaos Lacrosse to move on into this 26th season and see where it takes us.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated with football when it comes to the college to professional ranks of coaches, and like some coaches can't make the jump, some coaches can't. In lacrosse, do you see a distinction between the coaching traits that's needed for the PLL versus college, or how do you look at that from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess there is, just because it's the difference between rounding up men and rounding up, boys coming to men. You know what I mean? Like that age gap difference, I think a little bit. But I think there's probably a ton of college coaches that could still do it, no problem. And there are, you know what I mean? I mean, there definitely are that, have done it in the past, have been the coaches and then have done, PLL coaching. But I think it's definitely more of, not necessarily more of like a rah-rah, as in more of like, hey, this is what we need to do, this is how we need to execute, and go. And even though that comes down to it at the same college level, I think it's more of like, talking to, someone you're basically your own age, rather than, someone that's a few years younger than you. But yeah, I think there's definitely a correlation between it. And I think that the jump in lacrosse is probably a little bit easier than would be for like the NFL, and like, back and forth for college football in the NFL. Definitely a little bit easier. But yeah, I think there's definitely a correlation there that can translate over both, the PLL coaches to college coaches as well.
Yeah, definitely a smaller community too, right? Like you might have seen that player and coached that player in club or something like that growing up. And then he plays on your team at PLL, something like that, where you've crossed paths before, where that doesn't happen as much in the NFL. I'm interested, man. I've been a big supporter of the PLL. I love the trajectory and where it's going. Some people don't. There's always haters and stuff out there. But I'm interested. This Colsey situation is one that where they just like couldn't come to terms and things like this. It's a struggle of where the PLL is growing from just starting in 2019 to where it is now. What are some other things that folks behind the scenes don't see as it comes to just dealing with the ins and outs of a new professional league as a player?
I don't really know. I can't even imagine what Mike and Paul go through on a daily basis of trying to take the next step for the league. They work endlessly and tirelessly in the back end to try to make this the best league for, us as players, giving us the opportunity to still play, more so than when I joined back in the MLL, actually making it a living for these young kids coming out of college. Like actually being able to, support, themselves and actually try to do it full time, where, in the MLL days, there wasn't enough income in order to make it a full-time job. You were either a college coach or a club coach, or you had a full-time job and still do it. Now there's still guys that do that, but, they're really doing a good job of trying to take the next steps. And obviously, with last year being home cities, having home cities now was a big next step for them. Obviously, we're still touring and being a tour-based model, but you have home cities that are growing. That, when we are in Charlotte, it's a packed house for a doubleheader weekend, and people love it. So I think that's a good next step for them, that building that, home-based fan base, to then hopefully what they probably want to do eventually is have owners come in, and just like the MLL had a couple different owners for teams, have owners come in and, actually have home weekends like they used to in the MLL days, where you had 7 home games, 7 away games. So, I think there's a lot behind the scenes that, I think the public doesn't see, that goes on to try to really make this what it is and what it's become so far.
Yeah, I had Paul Carcaterra on 2 weeks ago, and we were having this conversation around the PLL, and the schedule came up, right? And this was before the scheduling actually came out, that was showing that there's going to be a kind of match here on championship weekend here or at least I think the quarterfinals, the opening round. But I'm interested in this schedule concept, because I got raked over the coals for saying, what leagues don't run concurrently, right? And I get that the traveling, I love the point that Kark made. It's like, hey, look, if the PLL tried to do this in February in Albany or something like that, good luck to try to get people out to the actual games, which is a revenue source for the league. I'm just interested in how you think about this, man, because I am a big proponent of like move the season earlier. I get fatigued, man. I'm going to be honest. By the time June rolls around, like, holy shit, I got to lock in for a whole nother league. This is going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, the conversation's always been there. Even when it was back in the MLL days, the conversation's always been there of like, why is it during the summer? Why is it? I think it does come down to, like you said, fan base. And, I don't think it's necessarily being competition with, the college game and stuff like that. But, moving that season forward, you look at how many college coaches are players, like it's really tough. And then especially with the overlap of the two leagues, I think there's going to be a solution down the line eventually. At this point, I don't think it's moving it any farther than it did this year, just because of that little bit of an overlap. But,
Sure.
I think that there's definitely a ton of factors as to why it can't be, at the same time. There's just too many overlap of players. Some of the best players are college coaches. Specifically Jack Rowlett.
NLL.
Well, yeah, NLL, you got some of the best players that still play both leagues. I think that you would, miss out on some of the players that are, still at their top end of their game because they would have to choose one or the other. And then at the same time, you have some of the best players in the world that are college coaches and they would have to choose college coaching over playing in the league. It'd be really hard to kind of run it, at the same time. So, I think there will be a solution in the future. I think something will come in the future to where hopefully the league can grow to where, guys can choose truly to do it full time rather than going to be a college coach as well. And supplementing income.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that, we'll see how the first step this year is of them moving the schedule up a little bit, with training camp and the first game weekends moving up to see where that, how that plays out and the factors that'll, come into it. But, it is what it is. I mean, I think we get the crowd that we're going to get during the summer. I mean, they're great. They've been unbelievable at every one of the stadiums that we go to. I mean, one of the best venues that I've been to so far that we went to last year was in Chicago, in Northwest Stadium at Northwestern, and it was unbelievable. I've never seen, when you're walking to the locker room, I've never seen it elbow to elbow, people fighting over the thing to get autographs from Blaze and all the players on the team. Like, it was a truly crazy crowd, and it shows that the growth of this PLL and how much it's gone from 2019 to where it is now, of how many people they get on a weekend for every city that we go to.
Yeah, I like that you brought up this college coaching piece and the multiple factors, because that, again, that might be something I wasn't really thinking about, and that shows how many factors behind the scenes that are going on that need to take place for any of this stuff to kind of work itself out. But I do love the evolution of, like, hey, let's try to move it forward a couple weeks and test this, see what happens. So I'm with you, man, and I like that behind the scenes there that you gave us when in Chicago. Not a lot of fans get to see the on the field stuff, unless they go to the actual games and things like this. So I appreciate that. Let's talk on a little bit of the chaos. Actually, let's get a lightning question in here about Jack Rowlett. Whenever I get a defensive opportunity for a question, I always want to take my shot here. But what makes Jack great, man, in your perspective? We'll keep it lightning question because I do want to move it on. But what makes Rowlett one of the best defenders?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly the little things, and it's so cliche to say, but it truly is the little things that, like, he always says, he's like, well, I'm not as big as some of these other guys, but the workout methods that he does to, like, strengthen his lower body and core so that when he does come up against an Asher Nolting, or, like, he's able to use his leverage in his body and knows how to play the tendencies of other guys so well that it's just like he talks about it on a different level that I've never even heard of it before. And just being a defensive-minded guy from the start as a goalie, the way that he talks about certain angles that he takes and certain, anticipation that he's doing, knowing, and I think it comes down to him knowing every person that he comes up against, just tendencies inside and out, what they're going to do when they're, there's 4 seconds left and there's a guy, like, he knows everything that's going to happen as an actual defensive personnel person. And I think that also helps his coaching for making the Terriers very good on the defensive side of the ball. It's the way that he talks about it is completely outside the box, that he just simplifies certain things and then understands what is going to happen and what tendencies the person has. And he's just always in the right spot. Always in the right spot. And then on top of that, he adds the flair of probably at least every team's best attackman at least once getting an over the head check on GLE that he always ends up hitting somehow. And he's got guys that are taller than him that he somehow still gets up over and hits it. And we look at each other and we're like, how did he just go over a 6'3" when he's 5'10"? It doesn't make any sense. Like, defies physics. But somehow he's perfected that to a certain point too, and just always in the right place at the right time.
I need to watch some Rowlett highlights because I want to see that over the head check. Because you're right. Whenever you think about over the head, you're thinking 6'3" defender throwing it on a 5'10" attackman. But yeah, like that Paisano check where he's like, yeah, dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I need to look at that. And I'm actually in talks with Jack right now, so hopefully I can get him on. Also, keep this nugget with you because I want that aspect, because a lot of the stuff that I was reading on you beforehand is like you're deep in the film room, deep on like kind of understanding the little things that you just mentioned about Rowlett, but for the goalie position and as a teammate. So we'll touch on that in about 20 minutes. Before we move on to kind of your, leadership and all that stuff with the Chaos, let's talk about the team in 2026 and recap 2025, man. You guys got to the quarterfinals. What was that like? What kind of made you guys fall short? And then let's talk on 26 real quick.
Yeah, 2025, it was good. We started off, slow. And then we had basically every great team has one of those games where you sit at each other, everybody sits in a room and kind of has, a heart to heart, or, what are we do? Why are we here type of moment. And that was for us was, against the Whip Snakes last year in Baltimore, and it was an ugly, ugly game. It was one of the worst games that we played in a while, and we reset ourselves, had a team meeting on Monday, sat in the locker room, kind of contemplating what we were doing, where we were going, and then really just kind of locked it in after that and really just reset ourselves. And we built something that was great, had a lot of good rookies, some sophomores take the next step, and then some veterans that really, guided us to where we got to in the quarterfinals. Fell just short. It just comes down to the Redwoods outplayed us just a little bit. That's all it comes down to. They made the plays when they needed to, and we didn't. So it just kind of came down to that. So, and they had a great season as well. So it was, it was tough losing that game, but because we had a lead at halftime as well. So it was. I think that's our next step that we need to take in 2026 is maturity in situations of understanding, being able to continue the play that we have into the second half and continue to push that needle forward instead of being complacent when we have a lead or something like that. We always were good last year. If we were down, we always said it was the worst place to be on the Chaos was up. That was our motto last year because it was always a dogfight in the end in the fourth quarter, and we always found a way to squeak it out at the end. So I think the next step is finding that fight to continue to do the right things when we are being successful early on and we're not from behind. So it's learning to win while we're ahead already.
I love that, man. Well, 2026, give me a prediction. What are you guys looking at? Again, we touched on it early in the episode, the coaching change and all that stuff, but what are you looking forward to here?
Yeah, added some crucial pieces in free agency. So I think it's going to be definitely a different style of chaos lacrosse. The defense is still, tight-knit group, added some pieces there as well. So some veteran pieces that I think will come in and help us, immensely. And then, offensively added some new pieces that, will fit into, Coach Brooks's, offensive schemes that he's going to, be the best at, drawing up what needs to be done and coaching us differently in the regards to that. And then, obviously, it comes without saying that every other team's offense is staring down the best goal in the world. So, you got to still score on Blaze. So it still comes down to that. And I think that we're going to build on what we started last year and then adding some new pieces, new coaching. And I think it's going to be, very different and a successful year for the Chaos.
I love that. I'm going to do my best, and sometimes I struggle with the kind of larger topics or the one thing I want to pull out of an interview, man. But in my pre-episode research, reading about you and hearing about you from Rebecca as well, and just all this stuff of how great a teammate you are, and a great person is really interesting, because it's a unique situation you're in, where that you're a backup goalie to Blaze most of the time, but there's a post on the Chaos on re-signing you 4 weeks ago that says you're the heart and soul of the team. And USA Lacrosse wrote a great article on you. I mean, all of your teammates speak glowingly of you. I'm just interested on how you kind of cultivate that as a leadership trait, and what your thoughts are on that whole kind of situation. I think a lot of people could take a lot from it.
Yeah, I mean, it started, it kind of came back and started from, college was really, having Coach Tambroni at Penn State, really kind of hammer home the aspect of, like, being a good teammate and always doing the right things. And even when you're not the one on the field. And that always sat home with me, because I was, growing up, I was always the one on the field, and it wasn't, I never really had that opportunity to see what was inside of me to, be a support cast to someone else. So, as I got to the MLL, I played for the Florida Launch. I played, for the Lizards for a little bit. And then, when the full merge was coming from MLL to PLL, I was kind of left on the wayside. There was every PLL team already had a starting goalie. So it was going to be, if someone was going to pick me up, I thought technically my career was going to be over. I really did. And then, when I got the call from Andy Towers, the original, Chaos coach, he basically was like, hey, listen, you were spoken highly of from Brian Doherty. You were spoken highly of from Blaze. We would love you to come be, the support staff for Blaze. You're not going to play. You're going to be Blaze's backup. But we really, truly want you to come be a part of the team. And if that's something that you're interested in, let us know. And I didn't even hesitate. It was like, absolutely. I'm here to do whatever is best for the Chaos to make us successful. And I really just kind of took ownership of it, as it kind of grew into, just being Blaze's support staff, and I try to tell, young goalies coming out of college, like, you're not always going to, professional PLL goalie is one of the hardest lineups to crack. There's 8 teams and there's eight starting goalies. Yeah. So it's like there's 8 starting goalies. So, and there's graduating goalies that are unbelievable every year. Like, it is a tough position to crack. So you're not always going to crack in and hit it at the right time where you're going to be a starting goalie. You might have to be a backup to start. And that's where you're going to show teams, coaches, that you can handle both being a support cast, and then when you win your job and earn the right to be the starter, you're going to be there. So, I just always have tried to be a good teammate and support, the coaches, that whether it's the players, and anything that I can do just to help the Chaos, be successful on game day.
I mean, it's a classic example, but it's one of the best examples I've seen of, like, kind of real world being a good teammate, having those actions kind of be portrayed, and then it coming back to you, right? You talk about Blaze and all of the other kind of people that reached out to Towers when he's looking to fill that position and saying, hey, this is the guy. So it's a really, really cool example for people to point to of, like, if you do the right things as a teammate, that stuff comes back to you. And to touch on your goalie position piece, where there's only 8, I think Entenmann came into the league this past year, and there was already a great goalie with the Atlas. I think I forgot his name. Who was the starting goalie for the Atlas that Entenmann came in? Yeah, Jack. Like he's one of the best goalies, and Entenmann comes in. It's like, look at that, man! It's insane the amount of competition you guys have.
Yeah, it's actually crazy. I mean, it's really hard to start. I mean, McNaney did it as well this year. Like, they had a great goalie, that was in there already, and then Logan McNaney stepped in at game 3 and kind of took over and did a really good job. So it is really hard. It's there's great goalies that come out of college every year, and I just keep telling those guys, I'm like, you gotta just, if you truly want to be in this league, most likely you're going to need to start as a backup and then earn your spot as the time comes. So it's it's a tough position to be in as a goalie, because you want to be out there, you want to be playing. But it's being the support cast in practice to support the starting goalie to help them be ready on game day as well.
Yeah, I want to talk on how you kind of get them ready from that support staff position. I mean, how have you evolved over the last 4 to 5 years in this position where you're helping get your team ready? Not only Blaze, the USA Lacrosse article is talking about how you're up and down the sideline on game day, helping the team in whatever fashion. So tell me a little bit about that, because I love some coaches or players that are on the sideline to understand what they can do to help their teams too.
Yeah, I mean, it's something a little bit outside the box that I started doing about 2 years ago, because it was always something that I grew up wanting to see if it was a possibility of doing. So the main thing that I do in practice, if we're playing a righty goalie, I'm playing righty in practice. So, because Blaze and I are both lefties. So if we're playing a righty goalie, I'm on the scout defense, like I'm playing right-handed. Whether if I'm going to make saves or not, it's getting our offense in the right mindset that they are going to see a right-handed goalie, so picking the right spots to shoot. Now, I'll toot my own horn a little bit, and if you get any other Chaos guys on here, they'll tell you. There's a clip that just went viral last week that on the post that they put on there, the Chaos put on there. I make that save righty when I'm chirping at Jackson Eicher. So you can go look at it and see it. I'm making clean saves righty too. So I'm not toot my own horn a little bit, but it's, it's something that I
switch hitter.
Yeah, it's something I've worked on in the off seasons of like trying to see if I can focus and read. And to be honest with you, I feel like sometimes I play a little bit better because I'm just trying to read and react rather than with my left. I'm trying to anticipate and think where a shooter's going to shoot. So, but yeah, that's like a main thing.
That happens a lot with. Sorry, there's a little bit of lag, but that happens a lot with it when you see like the fundamentals with the stick. It's like your left hand sometimes is better fundamentally than your right hand, just because you're focused in on the specific fundamental.
Exactly. Yeah, and I just feel like with my right hand in goal, I just wait for the shot to actually come, which is like the basic fundamentals of goalies. Like you want to wait for it to go and not guess and overreact. And I do that right-handed better because I know that I'm not as good with my right, so I just have to wait and actually know where I'm going. Whereas with my left, I over-anticipate, and I'm like, I think he's going opposite side, so I can cheat because I know I can get back to my stick side. So, but that's like one of the major things that I do in practice is I do play, if we're playing a right-handed goalie in the upcoming week, I play right-handed in practice. Now, Coach Colsey last year got a couple times because I'm actually making really nice clean saves or ridiculous saves in practice, and he's getting mad. But I'm like, hey, it's getting our offense ready. They're going to see a better right-handed goalie than I am in the game. So it's like, let's make this happen and get those guys in the right mindset to shoot the right spots.
I've never heard of a goalie switching hands like while he's in the pipes. That's interesting, man. So would you make the save and then you're outletting it with that right hand too, or are you switching to your left hand when you're making that?
It depends on the situation, but yeah, I'm most likely flipping it back. Like I am 100% flipping it back just to make sure I'm throwing a good outlet pass.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how many goalies can do that switch hitter that you were talking about, but it's interesting for coaches that are listening. I mean, if you can, scout that goalie and see if you can get a same-handed goalie in there pregame. That's really good. It
was something that I did it. I always did it pregame as well. Originally, like when I first was with the Chaos, like that first year that I was with the Chaos and we won the championship, pregame they would do like inside finishing. So when they were doing inside finishing, if we were playing a righty goalie, I'm in there righty, so they can know where their fakes are going to go to get their right mindset on the offensive side of the ball. So it's a little bit different when it's full speed and not just inside tight finishing. But anything that I can do to help to make sure that the offense sees what they're going to see on game day. And then if we're playing lefty goalies, Blaze and I, just playing lefty. So a little bit of mix and something that's like one of the major things that I do to help the team get ready.
Yeah. What are some other things you're doing specifically with Blaze? You have that experience as a goalie, right? And you're able to kind of hopefully talk with him throughout the game. Is that something you're doing? And what are you helping supporting him on from that position?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk through when he comes off the field, whether it's a goal that went in or, what I'm seeing, where they're shooting or what the defense is doing. Because I just have that other outside I'm watching from the field and watching everything progress at the same time as those guys are going through it. So when Blaze comes off, if a shot went in, he's like, what? I'm like, what were you seeing on that? He's like, yeah, like there's a screen or like it seems like where they're shooting, like where they're shooting the tendencies to try to shoot on Blaze, like what they're trying to do. And we kind of talk through that aspect of it. Now, I try to avoid it unless he brings it up because you don't want to bring up like, hey, what are you seeing out there as like a goalie? You just as a goalie, you want to let that guy just be in his head, like stay focused on the game. But if he comes out, he's like, dude, what are you saying? Like, all right, well, I saw that, like, maybe a little bit of a less of an angle on this shot or like stuff like that. But he's obviously the best goalie, one of the best goalies in the world, if not the best. So it's like I still take pointers from him of what I should be doing. But we have those small conversations. It's not very in-depth during games unless it needs to be. But most of the time, it's in practice or stuff like that where I'm just basically like supporting him of like taking more reps so that he can be fresher for the game and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm going to try to pull out just a couple more things that you do with Blaze specifically. I mean, that's a great distinction you made where you're saying, hey, I'm not going to talk to him and give him any advice unless he wants that. I could foresee a lot of coaches trying to force that conversation, maybe at the youth level where they're talking to their goalie. Well, maybe he just needs to be left alone or something like that. So anything else like you could give as far as assisting a goalie during a game and what is kind of missing sometimes from what you see?
Yeah, seeing and sometimes I feel like goalies get, you'll see most of the time, you need a good defensive voice. And it's always grown up that it should be the goalie. The defensive voice should be the goalie because he can see all of the field that's going on, and then the defenseman's got to focus on his guy and where the ball is. So, but I feel like, if you can have a good actual defenseman and the defense talks well together, the goalie can do a better job of still letting people know where the ball is, if the ball's coming in to make sure you're checking on the inside, and still commanding and sending slides, but they can focus on the ball a little bit more. And I think that's what Blaze does a really good job of because we have such a great vocal defense that Blaze still is directing and letting guys know when to slide and go. But I think that when he is able to focus on the ball, so on the sideline, I'm making sure that I'm still letting guys know hey, who's hot, trying to be that extra voice at the same time as the defense is doing it, of letting guys know where there's a cutter coming or something like that, so Blaze can still do what he needs to do best, is save the ball and focus on that ball.
Sometimes in these interviews, I take personal anecdotes just as coaching, little tidbits. And, in my defensive huddle, a lot of times my philosophy is having that goalie, I ask him, I make it a point to try to bring him in to kind of lead the guys. But from your perspective, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I'm doing that, maybe I should just, unless he has something to say, maybe I do kind of step back a little bit with forcing that conversation. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to the type of goalie that you have. If you have a goalie that can do it all, it's great. But at the same time, it comes down to understanding your goalie's tendencies and strengths that, hey, when he's not focused on sending slides and doing this and doing that, he's able to lock in on the ball. When he's locked in on the ball, he might not be able to do and vocalize as much of what he needs to. Now, goalies, once again, you still have to train and coach goalies in order to send slides when they're uncomfortable and understand the defensive packages and understand telling who's hot and who's two. But at the same time, that's also the 6 defensemen that are in front of them's job. That's their job to understand who's hot, who's two, and communicate that to each other, because the goalie can't do, they can, but they can't do that and save the ball and focus on the ball. So it kind of comes down to, being able to still understand the concepts and tell guys when and where, but more so focus on the actual shot that's coming and the shooter that's, winding up.
Yeah, I guess while we're on this communication piece, when, what I've seen from guys is, and I don't know if this is just has permeated throughout just lacrosse and, because there's tendencies across all of defenses. Most defenses are calling a hot or a two and all this stuff. What I've seen is goalies behind GLE, they'll kind of talk to that one player and talking about driving or pushing and things like that. But from a communication standpoint, give me a little bit more on what you're doing to help maybe an on-ball defender, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, on-ball defender, that's a big piece of it. Whether you're telling your defensive middies to cut the field in half, that's a major thing. It's cut the field in half, because as a goalie, it's hard enough to be a goalie as it is for the 6x6 and the tiny little ball that's coming at you, and they're shooting at 100 miles an hour. So any advantage that you can get by telling your on-ball defenseman, hey, drive them up and out. If it's coming from behind the goal, you're like, hey, goal line extended's coming, whether your defensive scheme is to turn them. Hey, goal line, making sure you're letting them know that you're getting there so that they can get their, disengage, get their feet upfield to turn them inside so that we can slide. Or, as I mentioned, your defensive middies or you're up top to cutting the field in half. there's nothing worse. A goalie's nightmare is staring somebody down in the middle of the field because he's looking at a 6x6 and I'm only 5'10". So, it's tough to understand where they're going to shoot when they're staring down the middle of the field at you. When you can actually force somebody to go an alley, now it's playing to my advantage where I can actually play my angles as a goalie into, the old school way of goalie play is baiting. I would be hugging pipes, forcing you to shoot the far side and then leaking early. So it's definitely evolved a little bit to where I've avoided doing some of that because shooters are so good at even picking that up that they can change where they're shooting in mid-shot. But still, any little advantage that you can get by coaching your on-ball defenseman to put them in the right spot, that where you want to see a shot as a goalie, is night and day. Because any advantage that we can get as a goalie is helpful to us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had Sean Byrne on the podcast probably 3 weeks ago, the great goalkeeper from Army. And I know you've given some thought about this, but like the different techniques and styles goalies have to play with based on their size, because Sean was saying he doesn't move as much. And I'm like, well, that might be because you're a big ass goalie, but
yeah, exactly.
at 5'10", man, how are you thinking about playing that position differently?
It's really annoying that when I can put my feet on the ground in cleats and my helmet barely touches the crossbar, it's really frustrating to me. But at the same time, I've adapted to, moving myself to different areas, especially as I've gotten older as well. So when I was younger and more spry, I would be, athletic in there, moving left and right, and, moving as the ball carrier moves a little bit because I know that I can, read my tendencies. Now as an older, I've kind of adapted to more of like a find a location to where I'm going to be in a good spot and then kind of wait for the shooter so that I'm not moving as much as the ball's moving, and I kind of just get to a spot and make it so that I'm covering where I need to cover, that I can then cover the rest of the cage as the shot comes. And then, the biggest piece that I've definitely, taken taken a page out of Dylan Ward's book, is when I'm staring down a shooter nowadays from 12, 13, 14, I'm going to come cut the angle off now. Where back in the day, I would put my heels on the goal line and trust my instincts to make the save with more reaction time. I'm stepping out there. I'm going to make you hit a spot. I'm going to take away some cage. I'm going to make you hit me with it. So it's definitely something that I've adapted as I've gotten older, that goalies will start to realize as they start to grow. You're going to change your tendencies as you grow for each next level from, middle school to high school to college. You're going to need to adapt and change because shooters get better, ball comes faster, and different pieces of the game change that actually make you adapt to the game.
I guess this happens on offense and defense, but it seems like from me talking to goalies, like the goalie philosophy is fluid in a way where, like, I've talked to some guys as much as, a month ago, and they're like, yeah, I used to be the guy who taught go out and cut off the angle. Now I'm like heels on the goal line because it feels like, I think what the reasoning there is like they give themselves extra time to maybe make the save, right, when you move back a little bit. So I don't know, it feels fluid, but how do you feel about the hang up situation? Like, I always see the guys coming and trying to double that ball, and I'm always like, that's never how I'd play it. How do you feel about that hang up situation and how it's coached today?
Yeah, so the way that it's coached nowadays is like, let them sit back there. Everyone's got a shot clock now. So it's like you let them sit and let them waste their own time. Like, there's no reason to go chase somebody and make them, you're playing into what they want. You're going to chase them and playing into what they want. They want you to go do that. They want you to go double it so that then you're now having to support and slide. Whereas now we're playing 6 against 5 above the cage. Technically 7 against 5 because I'm here as well. So it doesn't really make sense to go chase guys back there. But the one thing that I do like is, when we have, whether it's a short stick D-midi that's in a single invert or something like that, is, I'm always aware that, like, they're going to get attacked. We're probably going to have to support and slide. Anything that I can do to help that helps our defense for the extra few seconds that it is. So there's been a couple times that you've seen, in my games in the past, and in practice I do it as well. If our short stick or someone gets a little bit of a breakdown, and there's a step that I know we're probably gonna have to slide, I can usually beat that guy to below goal line extended to give our short stick or pole a chance to recover so that we didn't have to slide. And that's something that I've always thought that is a big...
So you're kind of a bailout slide.
A bailout slide, basically, that like then we don't actually have to leave anybody inside. I'm there to give him the extra second to recover to get back to the top side. So just like an extra added level piece of like, now you have to be able to read it and understand that like it's going to come quick, because it's not if someone's dodging from the corner and it's a full sprint. It's not that. It's when someone's getting broken down from at X, and it's the Sours change of direction back and forth. It's happening, and they then are starting to turn the corner because they caught him for a half a second. I'm just taking a quick step out, and then the guy ends up retreating for that half a second, and we can recover. So, that's something that I do, that I try to avoid that hang up as well. But the hang up is, with how everybody's having shot clocks now, there's no reason to go chase guys. You used to chase guys because it was like you were hung up and they could just hold the ball forever, and you wanted to flush it out to make them do something and get your guy back on there. That ball goes through, you're in a winning situation as a defense. Obviously, they're picking, they're moving, that they're trying to get that feed, but they're just tick, 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 wasting time. That's a win. As soon as the shot clock goes, if they have to dump it to the quarter, that's a stopped possession for the defense.
Yeah, I'm a big zone fan, and having that in your pocket for maybe a 10-second shot clock, ball goes out of bounds, let's switch into a zone. How do you feel about zone as a goalkeeper and the different looks you're getting from there?
That was our bread and butter at Penn State. It was our bread and butter at Penn State. It was what made us successful when I was there. Pete Toner, he's the head coach at Gettysburg now, was my defensive coordinator when I was there, and he had an unbelievable zone that we ran that it was like, as soon as the ball went out of bounds, he would call it in, and it was like lockdown, because when you go to that zone, you have to be relying on your goalie to make 12 and out saves. That's what you want. You want that shot to be from 12 yards and out, and you got to be relying on your goalie to make saves, so that you can, really just give up outside shots, get a goalie into a rhythm. And I've always been a fan of it. Now, the PLL, it's tough running zone in the PLL because guys are so good, and it's something that, you can always think about toying with, but, sometimes it's more so if like there's like 15 seconds and you just throw something in quick, because then it just confuses them a little bit. No one expecting a zone in the PLL, but, it's really hard to like go into a full zone, especially with the 2-point arc. That there's guys that can rip it from the 2-point arc, and no problem. Anybody can. So it's like you're basically giving up those when you don't want to give up those. So it's tough to do at the PLL, but I've always been a fan of it, whether it's the high school level or college level, just to kind of get like that added mix up. And you see, teams that come up against like the powerhouses, and they're coming up against a team and they're just outmatched, and they sit in the zone, and the score ends up being 7-6, and they keep it a game just because the offense is just, it's tough to crack a zone. If you got a good zone and your defense runs the principles right, it's tough to beat it.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of, I say a big fan, I've always respected coaches that could be like early sliding defenses at the highest level because of how good guys are, and I've always been a big fan of matchups and just like winning your one-on-one. But especially in the higher levels, I'm like, guys are so good. Like, if you're going to be an early sliding team, these guys can sling it. Like, good luck to you. So I respect defenses that can run that type of style at the highest level, zones too. Do you remember any principles from Penn State on that zone? And did you run that zone where it's a 3-3 zone, or did you run the zone where there's a shorty in the middle and kind of 5 guys around 151?
Basically, it was a shorty in the middle that had ball side responsibility of the crease. And it was, a little bit of a match behind the cage. So if you were on the ball, you're staying on the ball. But you basically had quadrants. Everyone basically had your own little area that it kind of came down to. So from the corners of the box into like a V, that was our LSM. So our LSM worked as their butts off to go from back and forth. Anytime there was a guy in there, if the ball got fed back, he was trying to play too as much as possible, because we wanted to give up a 14-yard shot, 15-yard shot from up there, that if the pole couldn't get there and had to get back, we're giving that up rather than it swinging down to the wing. And then the two corners, one was either a pole or a short stick. Sometimes we had
shorties
side, or we had short sticks on the corner. So it was one or the other. And then if we had the short sticks in the corners, they played down to like, I think it was like 12 yards is what we said. So they would play down to 12. And then once that guy came below that, they're passing it to the pole that would come up and accept. So it was basically all of the actual boxes on each side that you had your box. Unless it was like behind the ball, you're staying in the ball. Like if you're on it already, you're staying and you're just switching. Those two guys are just switching behind the cage on the pipes. And then if it was a pole inside, the inside guy had ball side responsibility. And then the top middle guy had the backside responsibility. The two corner guys still stayed out to honor the wings and honor the upper corners.
Yeah. I think I'm moving this year from teaching that kind of 3-3 Wesleyan zone where it's kind of like I don't know if you've seen it, but Wesleyan used it and a ton of people use it to almost like backer-ish, right? Where you have the two guys moving. You mentioned that LSM comes down, the other guy comes out, and it just flows back and forth. I'm moving to a more like 51 because we're not running it as much. But I love the distinction of like even in that 51, you still want that top middle guy to come down and support, even if you have a guy in the crease.
Yep.
Like that's an interesting distinction.
Yeah, and it's always more.
So is that guy on the crease ever coming out?
He can. Like if you decide to play that way, it just opens up the inside a lot more. That like if you're gonna leave the two pipe guys and that guy's gonna go play. Now you have to pinch more on the wings and then pinch more on top that you're collapsing it a little bit more than you want to. That when you leave that guy inside and you just make the pipe guys work, you're giving yourself, once again, if they're going to leave a guy behind, you're winning up top again. So it's like you kind of, back and forth, and those two guys are just interchangeable rotating.
I love that. Can you give me anything on just like regular, man-to-man, just your typical crease slide? Because we've been pretty down the rabbit hole here. What are some like higher level concepts being taught in the PLL now? It's really tough with you guys. I get it. Like you don't practice like a college team 5-6 days a week and all that stuff. But like, what are some things you've learned over your years in the PLL from a crease sliding perspective and strategy, philosophy, all that?
Yeah, I mean it's funny to say. I mean, there's not much difference. I mean, it really just comes down to what changes in the PLL is the personnel. And that's where you're going to change how you're going to slide to different personnel. So if it's if it's a Zach Courier dodging down the righty alley, well, he's not going to put it in his right hand. So he's most likely going to S-dodge you and come back underneath. So that's where at the same time, you want your on-ball defenseman to stay on his back hip and you collapse on the underneath rather than just go at him quick. You collapse more of an underneath. So, but then if it's more of like a Tom Schreiber dodging down the alley, you got to slide to the guy. So it's like you're just going to go and make sure you're kind of pinching on him until he moves the ball. And you're making sure that you're covering gaps because he can swing it to the backside.
It's almost basketball related.
So it really comes down to the PLL. Exactly. So it really comes down to PLL personnel of who's dodging to how you're going to slide if you are in a crease sliding defense. And being a crease sliding defense in the PLL is hard because all it takes is an inch of space for each team's off-ball finisher to just pop, boom, and then it's in their stick within 2 seconds. So it really comes down to like really communicating, making sure that you are covered up on the inside before you leave, and then the personnel of who's dodging, of when to slide and what situations you want them in.
I love this distinction, and there's some lag, so we can't really have that like immediate response, which I apologize for. But yeah, man, that distinction of personnel driven is very interesting. Like completely personnel driven, being so locked in on where these guys are going, as opposed to in a college scheme, you're kind of more just, again, scheme based. I talked with Paul Richards, who's the defense coordinator at Richmond, and I was asking him, like, with the advent of the shot clock, has your goals per game moved up? And he said, no, our goals per game is 8. And I'm like, you're insane. First of all, you're just 8 in a shot clock era is insane. But I'm interested in like the PLL. You guys move at even faster pace. What are you guys shooting for per game and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, but usually if you can hold a PLL team under 10, like that's usually a goal. It's like if you can hold a PLL team to single digits, you're going to be in a good position to win the game. Like that's basically the goal, is like the underneath 10 and below. is like the gold standard of what you're trying to do to win a PLL game. Now, obviously, there's going to be games that are 14-15, but that was like a good goal for the chaos of like, hey, 10 and below. We want to be at 10 and below. You hold teams to single digits, and you're going to put yourself in it. You put your offense in a good position to win games.
Okay. Well, I've got you for about 10 more minutes, Austin, so I'm going to try to squeeze out some questions. Some of these can be lightning questions. This can be one of them. But from your vantage point, watching Blaze every day, what makes him a great goalkeeper and what can people take away? I know some of it's just innate talent, right? Like I was doing a video on Sean Light. I was like, hey, take away some things, but what makes Sean great is he's freaking huge and national talent. But what can people take away from Blaze's game that would be interesting for them?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, natural talent. He is probably 6'1", 6'2", so he does have size as well in there that helps him. And then I'm not sure. I feel like whether he had I don't even know if he did play hockey growing up or not, but it's like he has that like kind of like hockey style where like he kind of drops to like a butterfly sometimes that you'll see, and he makes a lot of saves with like his bottom hand by like punching it down that like you just don't really see very often. So it's just like a different instinct that he has that like he's able to like drop down that if the shot's going low, but then still make like crazy saves up, and it's just like something that you just don't see. It kind of just comes down to like, and then he plays his angles really well. I mean, he really does of like using his size to his advantage and playing his angles well that just makes shooters put it to where he wants it to, and then it makes it an easier save for him. He always does make the crazy save every once in a while, but like a lot of the saves that you see the Blaze makes, it kind of looks a little bit more routine, but that's because he's putting shooters in that situation, and he does a really good job of it.
Yeah. From the NLL side of things, I've been watching it more, trying to take away offense and defensive tactics and just skills and all that stuff. But from a perspective of like, I don't know, the fakes that you see in the NLL when it comes to the offensive talent, you don't see it as much in the field game, but I'm just interested in what things shooters do to you in the field game that you're like, wow, that was really good. Because you see it in the NLL way more, but in the field game, like what are some, tactics that finishers do or, shooters do that gives you problems?
Yeah. Those guys, I mean, you still have some of those guys that play outdoor. So you have like the Jeff Teats that come out there and they wind up 100 miles an hour and it literally just like floats. And then I'm like double guessing. I'm like, oh. And then it just floats over my stick. And I'm like, how did he even do that? Like, I don't understand how the physics work on that. So, obviously the Canadian guys have that like flare of skill that they can, deceptively, dip your shoulder, throw it high. And it's a lot easier for them to do it on a bigger net. They do it on a 6x4, and now they can do it on a 6x6, and it's like, I mean, what are we doing here? It's like it's easy for them. So, and then obviously you have like the pure shooters out there that just are so good at understanding and snapping their wrist that changes the trajectory of the shot that comes. Then it's just really hard to get like Connor Fields does a really good job of like coming on the high side, coming straight overhand. Brennan O'Neill does it really well too. They come so hard high and the stick touches basically his heels and he can shoot it high or low from there and you have no ideas. You really just have to sit and really wait to see where it's going to go before you react. And I think a lot of the technology in mesh has changed that a lot too. Like, it's not back when I was in college where there was like soft, and then like hard mesh. And like guys really, you either had to tie your shooting streams really tight to have good whip in there. Now with like all these meshes that they have and the technology, like guys can snap it off with no whip and then still snap it with. It's like I think the technology has changed shooters' games for light years.
I'm like smiling ear to ear because I had this conversation with Andy Copeland, and I feel like I've been having this conversation. Why doesn't this technique exist more? Why is Brennan and a couple others the only guys that do it? And I was talking with Andy, who coached Brennan, and I was making that exact point. I was like, is it the technology? And he was like, I don't know. I mean, it's the skill. But, dude, I love that you brought that up because I'm like, how can they do this? The other thing I've been seeing from the NLL, which I really love, is that sidearm windup, and then they end up over the head. Even Brennan did it, and it got a little bit viral of he's winding up on the side, and then he brings it up over the top. That's a really interesting release, too, that you see in the NLL almost exclusively.
He does it. He does that in the PLL too, because and so does T. They all do it because if they wind up sidearm, they know that a defenseman's going to go towards the head of their stick, so they come here and then bring it back up over to throw it back at the goal a different way, and it's like a frozen. It just freezes a goalie because it's like you were leaning because he's coming low, but then it's like, and you got to come up and around. So they're really good at basically. It's basically just like a full-blown twister that they're throwing that is just, I don't understand the physics behind it too, but I think it comes a lot down to the technology and the mesh of how they can string now and make it so that that ball sits in there the way that they want to and can still float out the way that they want to.
I love that you said that because I feel like I'm shouting into the void about this stuff. I'm having like a love affair with this release you talked about, and no one seems to care. But it's the technology. I love it. One quick question: Penn State has gotten close a lot of times. I think Jeff Tambroni and that staff has been one of the best for the last decade plus, going back to when you were there as well. And I'm just interested in what you think is missing for them to get this elusive title that they're so close to, it feels like.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything missing. I think it just comes down to, I mean, they've had pieces in the past. They have pieces now. I think it's just putting it together at the right time. I mean, a couple years ago, we're not gonna go back to the crease dive that ended their chances of going to another national championship. That was he in the crease? Was he not? The reviews. There's now reviews now, so that's a good step that changed. But they've had the pieces. They've been there. Coach Tambroni does a really good job of making sure that they're prepared and ready to go. I think that. One thing that Coach Tambroni is doing a really good job of that Penn State never really did back in the day was your Penn State. You are the in-state school for Pennsylvania. You got to keep the best Pennsylvania players at home. Like, that's a major thing that he's starting to do a lot better job of that was just not in the past where, you have the best players, the Matt Rambos that was, the best player in his class going to Maryland. Like, that guy should be going to Penn State. You live in Pennsylvania, you're from Pennsylvania, you should be going to Penn State. Like, he's doing an unbelievable job of recruiting the best players from Pennsylvania, keeping them at home, and then, obviously still going to get the best players of Jersey, the Marylands, like still finding the pieces all over to bring it together. But, a major piece of it that I think he's doing a really good job of trying to keep the best players at home. And really fight for those guys to stay at Pennsylvania. And then adding pieces from the portal that they've added, adding some Canadian flair up there that they've always tried to have. I think they do have, something special and something to prove still. But I think that they're close. They are very, very close to taking that next step and getting the elusive national championship. That I've seen a lot of the reports already of can Hopkins take a step? Can no one really says anything about the Penn State. It's like, nope. It's going to be the snake in the grass that comes up and bites you. That I think that could be them this year.
I love that, man. I'm trying to actually find while we're live here the Inside Lacrosse top 20. I think they're in the top. Are they not in the top 10? I thought Penn State might have been.
I think they are in the top 10,
ranked.
but it's just it's.
Yeah, I think something like that. Yeah, again, we're dealing with some lag for sure. Apologies on that. Take me through, like, what is the most overvalued trait for a goalkeeper that's practiced a ton? And then what is an undervalued trait that's not given emphasis on the coaching side or practiced too much?
Overvalued that's practice. I think honestly it just comes down to just getting shots. I think obviously it says it's overvalued of like just seeing shots is going to get you better, but that's the truth. Like the more shots that you see, the better you're going to teach yourself of how to see the ball and save the ball. So it's like you just getting the volume of shots. I think it says it's overvalued, but at the same time it's not. Like you just got to continue to just see shots. And that's how you get better. I mean, I always go back to how I feel like I got better when I was a freshman in high school. I was pretty good growing up, and my head coach at the time, Mike Friel. There was Drew Adams that was before me. Drew Adams is one of the all-time great goalies, of professional lacrosse. Still the all-time save leader, and he went to Springfield as well. So I had big shoes coming in to fill of trying to be Drew Adams. I was never going to be Drew Adams. I had to be, my own goalie, but. We had, as a freshman, we had 6 a.m. practices on Friday mornings before school in the gym, in a wood gym with sneakers. And we would have rage gauges that were all the the fad back when I was in high school. They were just coming out where you could literally fold up a lacrosse goal, pop it up, snap it together, and you're good. And we would bring 2 of those out in a gym, and they basically just trial by fire. They threw me in there bouncing lacrosse balls that would probably pick up 10 to 15 miles per hour speed off a gym floor and just see shots in a gymnasium. Just shots after shots. Every Friday morning, 6 a.m. before school started at 7:30, we would have an hour-long practice, and it was just 1,000 shots. And I just feel like, I cried a couple times, getting hit with it. I'm a young freshman just getting hit with the ball and peppered. But at the same time, it was just seeing the volume of shots that I think just goes unsaid, that's how you just grow, get better, build your tendencies that you're going to be good at, and just see volume of shots. And then undervalued, I truly believe that you see a lot of goalies and teams lose games because the goalie turns it over in the clear. And it's more so that I don't think is very practiced very well, that I think that you got to have your goalie has to be able to decipher the ride, know where the open guy is, and make the throw. And I think that that's how you beat good riding teams, is your goalie being supportive. You see sometimes they're like, hey, we're going to pressure this goalie because he's going to turn it over. And I feel like this younger generation of goalie likes these big baggy pockets that they always have to stop their stick here to throw a clear pass. And I'm like, you look at my pocket, it looks like, I got it off the rack at Dick's. Like the pocket is this big, and I rely on my hands to control rebounds, and I want to be able to get the ball out quick, fast, and efficient, and not have any sort of lag in my throw. And I think that's the undervalued, piece that is not harped on enough for young goalies, is the clearing aspect of being them, making sure they're the expert in the clear and their stick work.
How can a player become an expert at that stuff? As far as, and I want to be just very specific here, what are some kind of tactics that you use as a keeper to go through those progressions correctly and see the right things?
Yeah, it's more so just learning the anticipation of understanding when in practice, when you're going through your clear, knowing where the look's going to be. So if they have a 3-back ride, you understand that they're going to be, packed up in the over the midline because they're going to have guys. But when we go to stretch and push a guy deep, they have to switch. So understanding that you have to drag them and really working on the film and understanding that where the coverage is going to go. The same way that we would ride, you have to understand that they're going to ride that way. So as the ball flows, understanding that, hey, we're flowing the ball this way to start to make them move, to understand that I know where the play is going to go. So a big thing that I loved doing in college, and I still do in this day, is when you're going to push up and you're going to have that guy stretch over the midline to try to loop it over the attackman. Well, they know that that's coming. So I would get the ball from the defenseman. I would push it up and I would be telling, hey, Joe, stay on sides. So I'm pushing that guy. The ride is pushing. And I know that, hey, my backside guy is going to be open. So as soon as I say, hey, Joe, stay, I turn back the other way, and now this guy's naked, wide open to step over because we're still on sides on that side. So it's basically learning how to manipulate the ride and bring yourself to where the look that you want to know, and it's going to be open. So, but that's just coming down to studying the film and understanding how teams are going to ride to how you're clearing and knowing where the open guy is going to be.
Yeah, that's a really high-level concept of becoming almost, I don't want to call it a quarterback. It's more like a point guard aspect of talking through what's going on the field a little bit through to your guys. I really think that is a high-level skill if you can become the point guard of the ride. And a lot of guys are not comfortable with that because they're not great field players.
Yeah, it just comes down to, it was always something that I took, I wasn't a very good clearing goalie in high school. My stick was terrible. It was horrible. So when I got to college, it was something that I really focused on with Coach Chambroni of actually watching the film of our clears and then other teams' rides of making sure that I understood where they're going to do, what they're going to do, if they're going to bring one attackman and jump me, if they're going to jump the sides, chase with 2, and understanding how other teams are going to ride so that you know where your progressions are going to go.
Define chase with 2.
Yeah, so if you got 3 attackmen, if they're going to drop one attackman back to the midline and he just floats to cover guys that are coming over and attack, and then they just have 2 attackmen down that are just working that, if the ball goes this way, Now this attackman's coming to the goalie, the other attackman's going to the other defensive to make it go cross field. So you're making that longer path to give more time for the ride to set up.
Yeah, playing that 2-on-1, 3-on-2 aspect. Okay. All right.
Yep.
The last two questions I have here, because we are over our hour time, Austin. I've got two, and I'll say both of them because I want you to think hard on this first one because it's kind of a gotcha question, right? Who is your goalie Mount Rushmore? All right. And then favorite drill and why is going to be another one. So we'll start with your favorite drill and why, and then we'll end with your goalie Mount Rushmore.
All right. Favorite drill and why? I actually, technically there's two, but I'll do my overall favorite. And it was something that I had no idea was even a goalie drill until Coach Tambroni introduced it to me my freshman year. So I have all the thanks to Tambroni for kind of bringing this in is, cards. So I call it cards. Basically what ends up happening is you take a deck of cards. You have the goalie still in their helmet, gloves off, stick down, standing in front of you. And then the coach, if it's me and I'm throwing cards, if you ever seen, any sort of, magic or whatever, when they're throwing cards one by one, right? Basically what ends up happening is the coach stands up, whether it's on a bucket, a chair, something like that. You get a little bit of height or depth or over the top of the guy, and they stand back about, 3 or 4 yards, and you toss one card at a time. And they have to try to step and catch the cards. So it's a hand-eye coordination, but what the biggest, piece of it that I always said is the most important piece for a goalie is the mental aspect of the game. I always say the most important shot for a goalie is the next shot. And, it really hones in that piece of it because as you're throwing these cards, it is near impossible to catch these cards. They're fluttering. Some of them are coming fast. Some of them flutter. You're trying to step in pretty fast. You're getting a good, you're going one. And it's like you're making sure that you're staying on a good pace because what the goalie has to understand is that if you don't catch it, you watch a guy try to fumble it all the way to the ground and try to catch it as it's fumbling all the way to the ground, right? But as that happened, 3 more cards came. So it's basically saying that, hey, if you give up a goal, it's fine. The most important shot is the next shot that you're going to see. So it's, resetting yourself that if you don't catch it, you got to focus on the next one that's coming and piece by piece. But then it also works on the hand-eye coordination of actually trying to catch the darn cards, and it's really hard. If you actually give it a shot, it's really hard. So, and I've actually done this tons of times with goalie trainings that I've done. Personal training is one of my favorite drills.
What are you
I still teach to this day that I think that is.
What are you standing on specifically?
Stand on a bucket or a chair, okay. Whether it's a bucket or a chair or a bench. Just try to get a little bit of height so that you're not equally, because it kind of gives the aspect of an overhand shooter that is shooting the ball in a trajectory. So just a little bit of height, just something to give you up a little bit higher, and just not necessarily rapid fire, but it's a good pace of one, and it's grabbing the cards, and then you basically throw them off stick side, a little bit of low, at their face, high, low, and you kind of push it to their side to make them actually step and move as well to try to catch it.
How important is resetting their posture in this drill?
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to be able to get a full reset, but it's more so of actually stepping to the card, actually moving your feet to the card, because what you'll see, sometimes guys just lean and reach, and they're not catching it. I say, hey, you got to step, and when they actually step and move their feet, they're actually gathering themselves, and then they actually catch the card. So it's actually not just moving your body, actually stepping and flowing, flowing through the card and actually trying to make that save.
Gotcha. All right, Mount Rushmore of goalies, and then we're out of here.
Oh, man. You have Drew Adams. I have to say Drew, once again, taught me everything I knew growing up, Springfield fellow, Penn State guy, all-time leader in saves. Jesse Schwartzman is another guy that won a ton of championships, unbelievable goalie. And then obviously if you're going to throw active guys in there, you have to put Blaze Riorden in there. It's just, it goes without saying that he is one of the all-time greats and will be one of the all-time greats for a long time. And it's It's been a pleasure and an honor to be his backup and learn from him as well. Hopefully, he learned a few things from me in the process. But I mean, I think that would be like my top echelon of guys that have done it for so long. I mean, there's too many of them to say.
There is.
I mean, you got older of like the Chris Collinses, you Galloway. Like, there's just too many of them that you can name. But I would have to really go with Brian Doherty, Drew Adams. Jesse Schwartzman was doing it for a very long time, and then honestly, you got to put Blaze up there just because he's the best at it. He's been doing it for foreseeable future, and he's climbing that all-time saves ladder like there's no other.
I love it, man. Austin, this has been a great conversation. I'm going to be having a good time watching you here in the championship series, man, and the chaos. You guys are my hometown club, so I appreciate the work that you guys do in the PLL and kind of growing the game in that way, man. I'm excited to watch you, but this has been a great combo. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you having me on.